give you a thumbs up if I see it.
Oh, it wants me to go through this again. It's also going to be live on YouTube.
Okay.
At the same time. Oh, what? What's happening?
All right, we're live on Facebook.
Really?
Yep.
Oh. Hi, everyone. If we've started, just saying hello. We haven't quite started yet. Okay. I see it on Facebook as well. All right. So I'm Corinne Segura from My Chemical Free House, and I'm talking with Andy Pace from the Green Design Center. He is the founder of the Green Design Center, which is the oldest green materials store. Also, by green, we mostly mean healthy, but also there's some environmental benefits of some of the products. He also works one-on-one with clients as a healthy home concierge and has a podcast called Non-Toxic Environments. Hi, Andy. I have a lot of questions, so I wanted to keep it short.
Fantastic. It is. It's very exciting for me to be here today. I've been looking forward to this. And as you can see, I'm kind of hooked up to some equipment here. I got a shoulder taken out a few days ago, but all is good. I'm back here in the office, and I wasn't going to miss this for anyone.
Yeah, I'm glad you made it. So I think we can see questions coming through. I have a bunch of questions, but I'll also keep an eye on the questions should come through. We're using StreamYard, so I should see them come through here. I probably won't be able to see people's names, but that's should still work. All right. So my questions are, I have quite a few, so I'm excited to be able to get you on Facebook Live. But I wanted to start with paint.
Okay.
A few paint questions. So between, like, if you have a customer or a client with chemical sensitivities and they're asking, should I go with AFM Safecoat or with the new Kiem? How would you like even help someone decide between those two?
Yeah, that's a great question to start with. I think that both can be great for depending on the application.
Yeah.
So, I've been working with AFM Safecoat since 1992, 93. They started in the early 80s, specifically as a company making paints and coatings and sealers for people who had extreme chemical sensitivities. Now, it uses, or AFM uses traditional technology, traditional technology being latex, or what it's actually water-based acrylics, to create this family of coatings and paints that can cure to such a highly cross-linked surface that it can block chemical off-gassing. It's very unique in the industry, but it still uses plastics, essentially liquid plastics. Now, back when I first got started, there were no other choices. I mean, the mineral paints like Kiem and Roma Bio have been around for a long time, but they just weren't very well known. And I think people were just afraid of using things that were just different. So this really fit a niche. It fit that niche of it needed to be just like anything else, but also have these added benefits of being free of chemical off-gassing and had the ability to seal. So I would say in most situations where people are doing a repainting of a project, I would go with the AFM because AFM is designed specifically to block chemical off-gassing. If this is new construction and now we have a choice of anything, I would probably lean towards using the mineral paint. And the reason for that is it's completely free of health hazards and toxins. It's not going to off-gas. And it has the added benefit of being 100% breathable for its lifespan.
Yeah.
And this is important, especially nowadays when we're hearing more and more about mold sensitivity and mold-related health issues. If you can allow moisture vapor that's in a wall to come out into the space and be dehumidified through your HVAC system, you can eliminate the greatest possibility for mold exposure in the future. And
Mhm.
the mineral paints will allow that. Traditional acrylic latex will not.
So when you're talking about AFM sealing and some off-gassing, you're just talking about their regular paint line, right? You're not talking about the specialty like primer.
Correct. Actually, all of their paints and primers will seal up off-gassing. And it's designed as such so that any combination of products, so one coat of primer, two coats of paint, two coats of primer, one coat of paint, will give you that 98 to 100% protection against chemical off-gassing. Now, it still allows for some moisture vapor transmission, but
Yeah.
it doesn't last very long. This is just a function of the chemistry of acrylics. After a period of time, these acrylic molecules start to push together like marshmallows in a bag, and it could take several years. But what's happening is the wall loses its ability to breathe moisture, and then you run into problems. And so, again, you have to choose the battle wisely here. If it's already an existing painted surface, you're not going to make it worse by putting more latex paint on it.
Yeah.
But you definitely want the protection of sealing up the off gassing of what's underneath. So the Safecoat product will do that. The Kiem product will not. So you just got to choose wisely.
Yeah, so there are a lot of building designs now that are specifying having the drywall quite breathable. Sometimes you want your drywall to be a little bit of a vapor retarder in some designs. But in the bathroom, for me, I wouldn't use the super breathable paint because the moisture, because you're creating so much moisture in the bathroom that it could go through the paint. Of course, it depends on how your wall is constructed and everything, but in general.
Well, I think you just hit it on the head. It depends on how the wall's constructed.
Yeah.
If you were to, again, let's say this is new construction, you can do whatever you needed to do to get the job done right. Behind the drywall, you could use what's called a smart membrane, which allows for moisture transmission from the cavity wall into the room, but will not allow moisture transmission from the room into the cavity wall. So using the combination of breathable paint, that smart membrane, and obviously proper dehumidification and air movement in the space, that really is the best way to go with all types of traditional stick frame construction.
Yeah, someone was asking, like when I posted about this event, if people had questions in advance. And yeah, one of the questions was about vapor barriers. And just as in most of the US, these smart vapor retarders are what's being used and what works in almost all climates in the US, except maybe Alaska and maybe some of the tropical islands could be different.
I'm doing a project right now in Hawaii, and we're not using that whatsoever. It's just there's no use for it. You've got a humidity level that's constantly between 50 and 70% outside and inside. So now it's just a matter of making sure all the materials that you use are going to be protected against any moisture absorption and retention, thus leading to mold problems. So we just choose materials a little bit differently.
Yeah, so I did get a comment recently, and of course, this is a comment I've seen before. What can cause a paint and even a zero VOC acrylic paint to off-gas for a long time? Like, are there things that can go wrong that can cause it to off-gas for more than, I don't know, like the normal few days or a week or whatever it is?
Yeah, so actually there's two things happening here. First off, explaining the difference between off-gassing and curing.
Mhm.
Water-based paints, most water-based products, paints, coatings, adhesives, things like that, take between 7 and 10 days to reach a full cure. And a full cure would be that all of the moisture has been released and the film has developed to the maximum potential. Now that's based upon 70 degrees and 50% relative humidity, perfect conditions. If the humidity is high in the space, if the moisture content of the surface is higher, if the temperature is lower, this can lead to the cure time taking a lot longer. So a lot of times, especially this time of year, if you're involved in a whole home project and you're painting surfaces, you'll notice after 3 or 4 days that the primer coat might still be sticky. And that's the same with anybody's product.
Yeah.
It's it's imperative to dehumidify the space, get some air movement, get that stickiness to go away, because if you were to put a coat of paint over it at this stage, you are going to lock in moisture that could take 6 to 8 months to come out. Now, this still isn't technically considered off-gassing. This is still considered curing. Off-gassing starts once curing has stopped. It could be in that 7 to 10 day range. It could be longer depending on the situation. But off-gassing would be the release of unreacted chemical monomers that'll never become part of that finished film. And that is what can linger anywhere from 2.5 to 4.5 years, or even longer in some situations.
So what happens if you paint the coats too close together, where the first coat, whether it's the primer or just the first coat of paint, hasn't dried even yet?
Right. Yeah, and that's where you run into those situations where you get that those lingering odors, because the moisture in the product is still trying to come out. And so I don't want to get too technical here, but keep in mind that a water-based paint will be dried to the touch normally within, let's say, an hour, right? It could still be kind of sticky, but at least it's not a liquid anymore. After 24 hours, in most proper situations, it's 95% cured. That last 5% takes that 7 to 10 days to come out. Let's say after 24 hours, or worse yet, let's say after 2 hours, the painter says, I'm going to put on the second coat, and you still have a very, very high moisture content in there. It was just barely skinning over. They decided to put on another coat. Now that top coat is going to cure faster than the bottom coat because it has more exposure to the air. And that bottom coat is still stuck there, sort of soft and moist. And it's going to take a long time for that to come out. And as I've talked about before, when moisture comes off of a surface, it carries with it the chemical footprint of where it was. And so it just so happens that when you're dealing with water-based acrylics, with natural minerals in it, that moisture that's coming off is going to carry that definitive paint smell to it, whether it's a Safecoat paint or a Sherwin-Williams or anybody else's. The biggest difference is with Safecoat, they don't use any chemical masking agents to hide those smells, because they understand that those chemicals end up being even worse for you, where most paint brands will add in other chemicals to make you think there's no smell. And so you really have to use your best judgment, but touch the wall. Does it feel like it's ready to go? Understand that if it's 70 degrees and 50% humidity in the space, then after 4 hours of sitting, it should be okay to recoat. But you don't want to just guess. You want to use some equipment and to make sure, because you never want to be in a situation where now you've coated over it and there's no fix for this. The only thing that fixes this is time, and that could take many months.
Yeah, that's a problem. So people should, if they're kind of around during the painting, they should at least be aware of like the temperature and humidity, and kind of just vaguely at least keeping track of things, because putting too many coats too close together could definitely cause a long problem. What about when there's news of this, but I don't know if we have any more specifics, or if you do, different brands like reacting to each other? Is there some kind of playbook? Do we know what kind of brand, or maybe not brand, but type of paint reacts to another one that was already on the wall?
I wish there was. I mean, we've seen just in talking with clients over the years, certain ones that had problems. We've had issues with paint going over like the Sherwin-Williams Promar products. It creates just a funky smell that with some people it's acceptable, tolerable. With others, it's like, get me out of the house. I don't know what it is about that product. I don't think there's anything in there that's done on purpose to make it like this. It's just a combination of ingredients. We've had an experience recently with the fine paints of Europe with the exact same issue. But it's not limited just to using Safecoat. It's to any top coat. It just creates this. The
So
best
you're talking about AFM over Promar, not Promar over.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's AFM over the cured Promar product.
Yeah.
The best way to think about this is if you were to take a piece of wood and smell it, dry wood and smell it, it smells like wood. Now take that piece of wood and put water on it. Now smell it. It smells like wood times 10. It creates this flushing action. And let's say that wood was, cedar versus pine versus oak versus walnut. They all have different reactions to the water. They all will smell stronger, but some of them are far more objectionable than others. And so there's really no way to predict without just trying some tests first before you start.
Yeah, doing a test is ideal. I would also have a test piece of, like, let's say you're using AFM for your new coat. I would do like a test piece of drywall, or it doesn't necessarily have to be drywall, just with that, so that if you come in after a week and you're like, it's still off-gassing, check out your sample and be like, oh, that's just the normal. I'm just super, super sensitive, and the humidity's high,
Yep.
and it just hasn't fully cured and off-gassed yet. So if you can make up your sample boards at the beginning, ideally you would even have like a Promar. If you know what was on the wall before, like have that first, but most people don't. So let's say that either 2 coats of paint were painted on too close together, or you've got some weird reaction between the 2 different brands. Would you go in with the transitional primer and try and block that, or would you try and like outgas it first with a bake out?
Well, yeah, I would try anything else first before putting another coat on, because that for sure will prolong the original problem. It may help to block some of the smell, but that problem still exists. So you might just prolong the entire process. I would couple of things: dehumidification, air movement. Try to get it to cure out naturally. If that's not working, one thing that has worked for years is to take either rubbing alcohol or just a very cheap vodka and pour some in a bowl, get a sponge, wring it out, and then just wipe the surface very gently. What's going to happen is, as the alcohol evaporates into the air, it'll pull with it moisture that's stuck in that surface.
It's the solvent, so it's
Exactly right. So I would try that. The bake out process, I'm always hesitant to do that because, even when that particular process was sort of invented, it turned out that you had to keep the temperature, at 100 degrees for 2 weeks straight with constant, airflow and air exchanges. And even with that, you end up voiding the warranty of so many things in your home because of the exposure, that it's just not worth the trouble.
Yeah, you'd have to know the warranty of basically anything wood to start with.
Yeah.
That could be the riskiest problems. So what does the alcohol trick work with? Because we have oil-based paint, which is sometimes still used on trim and doors, though not very popular. We also have alkyd paints, which are now a water-based version for trim and doors usually. And then we have our regular acrylic paints, which are now usually very low or 0 VOC, no matter the brand. So does that trick work on all 3?
No, it really only works on the water-based products.
Okay.
Because again, you're trying to pull the moisture out. I would think with alkyd or oil base, you'd have to go with another type of solvent. In the case of a water-based paint, water is actually considered the solvent.
Yeah.
So in the case of alkyd or oil-based, there are other ingredients that would be considered solvent. And I think with those, you end up probably running into other problems because of the solvent itself. Those might be a situation where you may be best off actually in either. Let's say the water or the alcohol trick didn't work for the water-based paint, or is not working enough for you. This is where we'd look into doing something like a pure shellac. Even though it's got alcohol in it, sometimes you got to take a step backwards to take 2 steps forwards. There's no easy way to do it. I mean, ultimately, probably the most effective way is to rip out the drywall and replace, but it's certainly the most expensive way.
Yeah, it's tricky, especially if you don't know exactly what went wrong in the first place. But shellac, yeah, is a great block of things. But like you're saying, if it could just prolong the off-gassing at times.
Right.
Okay, so I think those are all my paint questions. Someone asked in the comments for this video about cabinets. Now I have an article on cabinets. First of all, by the way, is the background noise getting through here? It's all right. You can hear me?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, it's really loud over here.
Oh, no.
So I have a long list of cabinets, and sometimes that can just be maybe overwhelming. So I wanted to see if you had a top pick in the wood category and in the metal category, because I know you have some recent experience with metal cabinets.
Yeah. So, I really like the crystal cabinets myself. The brand out of Minnesota. I've been working with them myself for many years and recommending their products. I actually had the opportunity to visit their manufacturing facility this past winter, and it's just fantastic. I mean, when it comes to wood cabinetry, I don't think there is a better product made, quality wise, style wise, and the fact that it's the only cabinet company, a production cabinet company, that will use formaldehyde-free clear finish upon our request.
Mm-hmm.
And they
And
still
what
use,
finish are you recommending to them?
well, it's interesting. They use a brand called Bernal, which is a series of pre-catalyzed lacquers.
Okay.
In the kitchen cabinet industry, you have to remember that companies that manufacture cabinetry to be shipped all across the country, they have to meet a certain classification from the Kitchen Manufacturers Cabinet Manufacturers Association that states that their products can be stacked in manufacturing and can be shipped without marring. Um, and then, because they're shipped in boxes and they get installed on site, they have to be in perfect condition. Otherwise, people will be complaining about all the little mars and scratches and so forth. Um, when cabinets are made locally at a local fabrication shop, installed and then finished in the field, they can usually use different finishes, but they normally do not use really high quality lacquers on site. They just use like a good quality latex paint, unfortunately, because these will not work on kitchen cabinets. But this is the problem we have. So Crystal uses a really, really good brand of finishes. However, and even though they're all like considered low VOC or even in some cases Green Guard certified, most of them still will create small bits of formaldehyde after the full cure because it's a byproduct of the ingredients. And a few years ago, Crystal did test one of these formaldehyde-free clears and determined that it meets their classification, it meets their durability and longevity tests. So they do offer that upon request. But your cabinet dealer definitely has to include that in the quote to make sure they do it.
So just asking for their clear coat without formaldehyde?
Yeah, it's something the dealer would do. It's requesting the formaldehyde-free clear finish, and it's what's called a special request, and the dealers will know how to do that.
All right. And what about metal cabinets? Did you find out anything recently about any good brands for extremely, extremely sensitive people?
Yeah, we've worked through a number of these with some customers recently that just the mere thought of wood cabinetry would be, I think, would be extremely difficult to think about because of just the smell of wood and the fact that um, that would that could possibly trigger a reaction. Um, I think that there are several brands of metal um, around, at least around North America, and a couple from Europe that are actually fairly good. And if you give me a minute, I'll find it, the one we ended up going with, because our client did exhaustive research on this. And honestly, here's what it actually came down to is metal cabinetry, because all the components of it are metal with a powder coated finish. There's no off gassing whatsoever. The only thing that was questioned was there is a factory installed silicone gasket on all the doors and drawers, so that it's basically like a bumper. So when you close it, you don't get a loud clang.
And it was silicone?
It was made of silicone, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we sourced out a couple of different versions, and we're able to have the customer choose which one was the least offensive.
Mm. Nice. Yeah, if it's silicone, that's ideal, because not all the companies are using silicone gaskets, right?
No, a lot of them are using neoprene or
Which
other types of
smells.
rubber.
Or what was the second rubber you said?
Oh, a neoprene is one, or some other type of rubber.
Oh, okay. So yeah, something not silicone, which is really the kind of the only bet if you're so sensitive to be going with metal cabinets, that's probably what you want to do. Neoprene, yeah, has a smell. I mean, rubbers can really smell bad.
Yeah, definitely, especially in a kitchen too. I mean, because you're constantly wiping them down, and again, that becomes more airborne.
I saw a question. Okay, so on to carpet. I saw a question about someone complaining about one of the carpet brands, like basically like little pieces of it like coming loose, and they are concerned about the durability. So I wanted to see which wool carpet brands you really like, and like how they held up, like how durable are they, how long do they last, like
Sure.
that kind of.
So it's inevitable, no matter what the product is, what the material is, there's going to be situations where people are going to find some materials that just aren't up to par.
Yeah.
That's the one thing about building materials, is that nothing's perfect. It doesn't matter if it's a healthy product or an unhealthy product. From a durability, longevity standpoint, you're going to find some products that just aren't right. And so if you have, let's say, a wool carpet, and some of the carpet itself, the fiber is coming loose, it has to be determined, well, is that because of stitching issue? Is that because of the fact that wool just generally sheds? And new wool carpet, if you put your finger into it and pull some out, you'll find loose hairs on your fingers. That's natural. That's going to happen. But it shouldn't unravel. It shouldn't come apart. If that's the case, then either that's a bad roll of carpet, or it was installed improperly and wasn't seamed correctly. Wool carpet is going to last between 70 and 100 years.
Wow.
This is why wool is installed in Europe. Most homes that have carpeting, they'll use wool.
Really?
Because first of all, a lot of it's manufactured over there, so they have more availability.
Yeah.
But the other thing is most carpeting is over there is not installed as wall to wall. It's installed as large area rugs, so that if they do ever move, they can roll it up and take it with them. The average plastic carpet, which all other carpets today are either nylon, polyolefin, some other materials, polypropylene, or they're wool. The plastic carpets are designed to last 10 to 15 years before they start to need to wear and look like they need to be replaced.
Yeah.
And manufacturers recognized this years ago, so they started essentially creating a useful timeline on these, so you have to replace them. So this is why you'll end up spending more on wool carpet, because it's a better quality material, it'll last longer. Downside is not all wool carpet is made the same. There are brands like Nature's Carpet in Canada, Earthweave down in Georgia. They make really good quality synthetic free, plastic free carpets, not treated with any pesticides or chemical dyes. But there's not a lot of choices when it comes to color and pattern, because you're dealing with natural wool colors.
Yeah.
So it's a trade-off.
Have you seen the problem with polyester? There's always been so many people talking about polyester carpet not lasting as long compared to nylon. Nylon's like the more typical carpet, but polyester comes in 2 zero VOC options. So I don't know if that's something you've ever seen, that polyester is less durable than nylon.
Yeah, so nylon is a stronger fiber. So yes, also a lot of the nylon these days is recycled. So from an environmental standpoint, it's better. They use what's called a nylon 6,6.
Yeah,
It
that's the
can
best one.
take dye better. So there are brands out there of like really, I don't want to say industrial, but more commercial type, like Floor, FLOR, the Forbo Flowtex. These are commercial grade carpets available in either squares or in broadloom that I've actually tested myself. They do not off-gas formaldehyde whatsoever, which means there's no flame retardants that release formaldehyde, and there's no dye that releases formaldehyde, which is really important. I have tested quote unquote zero VOC residential grade carpets that have formaldehyde off gassing in the 200 to 400 parts per billion range.
Yeah.
And the reason why they get away with it is because, first of all, formaldehyde is not reported as a VOC. They're reported separately. So your carpet can be zero VOC. Your paint
Really?
can be zero VOC, but still contain formaldehyde.
Okay.
It's what's called the EPA test method 24. So they
Oh.
get rid of that as one of the components. The other thing is, I remember this particular project a few years ago. I tested this carpet. The whole family got sick. I was getting horrible headaches, nausea. And I went out there and tested that the zero VOC eco-friendly carpet was extremely high in formaldehyde. I ended up getting a cease and desist letter from Shaw because, how dare I tell people that there's formaldehyde coming from their carpet, because there isn't, they said. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I will take a piece of your carpet. I will pay to buy the carpeting. I'll pay to have a chamber tested. It'll cost me about $2,000. We will find out exactly what's in the carpet, what's releasing the formaldehyde. They got back to me about 3 weeks and said, we did a little more research and we found that the manufacturer of the fiber we use, basically, wiping their hands of this, they don't make the fiber, they just use the fiber, buys a dye for the fiber that may release formaldehyde. So essentially, the formaldehyde was 3 times removed from them. And
that was a Shaw carpet. And have they changed their marketing since, or?
Nope.
Really?
Nope.
I don't know which one that is, but you might not want to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've had problems with a number of brands of those eco-friendly carpets where they still release formaldehyde because it's in the dye.
Yeah, for me, the ones like I've sniff tested the Mohawk Arrow and the Empire Today Home Fresh, and they don't seem to really have any. I can pick up the odor of formaldehyde and most VOCs because they have an odor. To me, those seem quite good. I have had clients use them, but yeah, I would. Synthetic carpet is never perfect because it has flame retardants. It's got probably biocides. So you can never really compare. I mean, wool is still going to be like if you don't want flame retardants and all that kind of stuff, which usually don't have any odor. So you can't just test it and see.
Well, this is the interesting thing too. It's there's a couple things going on. One is some people just have an aversion to wool because they don't want to use like these natural animal products.
Yeah.
Understandable, respect them for that. But here's your choices beyond that. Now, one of the problems with wool is the fact that, especially in higher humidity applications, wool will have a whole house full of wool carpet will have kind of a barnyardy smell for a while. That's just the natural aroma of the fiber. There's nothing you can do to get away with it, and nothing helps it except for time and dehumidification. That's it. And eventually you just kind of get used to it. But if you've ever owned wool clothing or a silk shirt, it's got that quintessential aroma to it. That's just the natural smell. And as long as you understand that before going on to the whole project and you set your expectations, it'll be perfectly fine. If you believe you're going to be installing a whole house full of wool carpet and there's not going to be a single aroma coming off that floor, then you're going to be shocked.
Yeah, you've talked about it one of your podcasts quite a long time ago, but there's a difference between something having a smell and something being toxic. So
Yes.
For me, brain retraining, Gupta, DNRS are really important to make sure your brain isn't cross wiring. Like, even like we just talked about wood cabinets. And this might not be a fast process. You might not be able to, like, oh, I'm just going to fix it and then I can buy my wood cabinets right away. It takes time, but the smell of wood is not toxic. The smell of wool is not toxic. The smell of cotton, like in mattresses, when they use organic batting, can have a smell, is not toxic. So for me, I just want to always mention that because I feel like it's important.
Oh, definitely important, but it's also the fact that we're now finding more and more clients coming to us who suffer from chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and with that, there is just there is a very, very severe reaction just to strong aromas, whether they're dangerous or not, it doesn't matter. And so, it all depends on what part of the process they come into us, and have they started that brain retraining? Is it even possible for them? Do they have a limbic system that just doesn't even allow it? Um, have they started any type of treatment for the actual crux of
Like,
the problem being
yeah,
a mold
yeah,
exposure or heavy metal exposure?
yeah.
It's so difficult. And then put on top of that, Kareen, as well as I do, that a lot of people who are starting to find us around the world, they don't know what's going on yet. They're still at this infancy stage of what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
And so therefore, when they read that it's better to use this because it doesn't have a smell, and then they find it has a smell, they instantly blame the product and whoever sold it, because how dare they sell a product with smell? The fact of the matter is everything in the world has an aroma. Everything. There is no such thing as an odorless anything. It's just a matter of at what level and how can it be blocked, um, and how can it be tolerated. And so this is where doing that sniff test and understanding exactly what you're putting yourself into will allow your brain and your limbic system to sort of calm down a bit, to say, I know it's not dangerous, I know there's a smell, it's not going to hurt me. But for a lot of people who first find us, they don't know um, exactly where the problem lies.
Yeah, the beginning of MCS is a difficult time. You also don't know, like, getting samples is difficult because you don't know how to extrapolate from a small sample to a large one. You haven't had a lot of experience in different buildings, knowing, like, one of the things that helped me was just going to different Airbnbs and hotels that were like 7 years old and 10 years old. And I'd be like, okay, so I'm okay with these materials after this amount of time, or how much time after a place has been painted. So there's so much in the beginning if you're in the beginning of MCS, you really just have a lot of things to figure out. And like you're saying, like, I would kind of treat the underlying cause before you go into brain. I mean, you could do brain retraining at the same time, but like there's likely also a medical part to it. And then brain retraining it was a number of months before I could use essential oils, which was like a huge trigger of mine. And of course, natural smells. But anyway, that's slightly off topic. But anyway, for wool carpet, you're going to be coming out with one that's just for the Green Design Center. Can you just give us like a teaser?
Yeah, I mean, the teaser I can say is we're working with one of those companies that I mentioned before. I won't say who yet because I don't want to divulge our sources on this until I can be excited to tell everybody. But we're working with one of these companies to produce a line that's matching up with what our clients are asking for.
Yeah.
Our clients are asking for a little more choice in color. Not always possible with these types of products, but there's a way to blend colors of the fibers to give us some range. And we're also looking at a product that has a little more softness to it.
Okay.
So it's more comfortable underfoot.
Nice.
It definitely will be a traditional jute back.
Okay.
It's going to be completely synthetic free. And I think most importantly, it'll be available in stock here in the United States, which sometimes is difficult working with our Canadian friends because everything has to cross the border at the time of the order and take some time. But this is going to really improve, I think, availability. Again, I understand that we're doing the best we can with the materials we have available to us. We're dabbling a bit with what are called vegetable dyes, with the fibers in lieu of traditional dyes that are used for fabrics. So we think we're gonna have a really good, attractive, durable, and hopefully meet a good price point for it as well.
Nice. Okay. Stay tuned, because
Stay tuned.
So are there any questions based on what we're talking about, or based on something else that we haven't talked about? I'm going to look at the Facebook page. I can see some comments coming in through StreamYard, but I don't see any specific questions. Let me just check the... Okay, well, that's okay, because I have got lots of questions, and people submitted questions in advance too. So we have so flooring.
Mhm.
Well, what's the most popular floor at Green Design Center? I'm just curious to know that too.
Most popular floor right now is it's a tough one. It always goes between natural linoleum and natural cork.
Okay. I didn't think linoleum would be up there.
Yeah, well, but both linoleum and cork, they kind of go in these phases. It's like they go in and out of popularity. I'll say cork, and to give us, to put a cap on it, I'll say cork. And the reason is that cork is now really starting to come into its own with design, durability. I think the only downside is that because of other popular flooring materials that we've used, like the Cali luxury vinyl product, which we still sell a lot of, and I still recommend for a lot of situations. For some people who just say, you know what, I've got a little extra in the budget. I want something that's completely natural. I want to feel good about, the manufacturing of it, all that stuff. So we work with Wickander's cork. It's made by Amarim out of Portugal. And they just released a new version of their cork floor. It's called their Bio Natural. This is unbelievable. This is, when I first saw the samples of this, probably about a year ago, I would bet $1,000 that I was looking at a piece of white oak.
Okay.
It's that realistic.
Oh.
It's actually solid cork. Then it gets a printing process utilizing sugarcane ink.
Okay.
And that sugarcane ink also sort of hardens on the surface to create that hard, durable wear finish. It feels and looks like real oak and real walnut. It's unbelievable.
Okay, I haven't seen this one yet, because the same brand also has one that looks like cork on the top, has cork on the top.
Yes, so they have their current version is called Woodwise or Corkwise.
Yeah.
The Woodwise has a layer on top of the cork made from recycled PET, plastic water bottles. So there's no phthalates, there's no chemical release, but it's then printed and texturized to look like wood. Compared to LVP, it's actually a better pattern. It looks more realistic, without a doubt, which is why that's been our most popular floor.
Nice. Okay, I need to get a sample of that one.
The cork version is essentially the cork base with a very thin veneer of cork, and then just a thin top coat of that clear PET as protective. And so it still has that look and the feel of cork, but the durability of the PET. Now, the Bio Natural product, it was announced this past January at a national trade show, but it's now finally starting to make its way to North America. We should have our display samples within the next few weeks. This will blow that away, durability-wise, appearance-wise, and for a company who really prides itself on sustainability. I mean, you have to understand that cork trees, the cork oak tree, it's the only tree in the world that you can harvest the cork and it regenerates every 10 to 12 years.
And the animals still live in the forest while they're producing.
Exactly. It's unbelievable. And it's unfortunate because of this shoulder issue here. I should be in Portugal next week actually visiting the plant,
Wow.
but next year we'll go. But honestly, I had a chance to interview the president of Amarim a few months ago at a trade show, and he was so excited to talk about this process and the fact that they're buying acreage specifically just to preserve it and to make sure that it goes untouched, and to then manage it through the the proper stewardship of a cork farm,
Yeah.
which is great for the environment, great for the local economy. But for us, it's just a fantastic floor. I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely the number one in our book.
Yeah, the good thing about that company is, so I think it was like 5 years or so ago, I was testing all the cork brands, and they just all had such a strong odor of either like a polyurethane glue or a formaldehyde glue. And this company doesn't use those. There's a really minor odor, but are they still using the PET as the actual glue of the whole cork floor part?
Not anymore. Not anymore. They're just essentially using, cork contains a natural sap that's called suberin.
Yeah.
And when you grind cork and then press it back together again under extreme pressure and humidity and moisture, you can actually get it to essentially stick back to itself. So they've sort of mastered that process to a certain density.
Yeah.
And now they don't have to use the PET. And so, which is why they're able to go to make a flooring material that really is a first in the world for this type of application.
So they're not using any binder at all?
From what I understand, no.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. That's definitely a first, because the PET binder was great because there's not really much off-gassing at all to recycled water bottles either. So
Correct.
and it made it quite waterproof too.
Yes.
There's a couple questions. Attaching carpet or cork to concrete subfloor, what adhesives are safe for MCS people?
That's a good question. I would say in most situations, none. There really is. I mean, honestly, I would try to avoid the use of adhesives. Now, that's the simple answer. The more complex answer is, what are we dealing with? Is this a concrete slab on grade, below grade? Is there moisture transmitting through the slab? Understand that carpeting will allow vapor transmission and cork will not. So it's a matter of choosing the right materials that won't exacerbate any moisture issues that you have. I really like floating floors in this application and utilizing a floating floor underlayment that blocks the vapor, protects the floor, and gives a little bit of cushion. If you have to use an adhesive, let's say you are doing carpet, now you can use the traditional tack strips and do a stretch and tack method of carpet over concrete. So that's not a problem. But the problem exists when you're putting down the pad, because most carpet installers will want to use what's called a pad adhesive, which is basically a gallon full of really noxious liquidy solvent that they just dump in spots. And when they put the pad down, it keeps the pad from shifting while they're stretching the carpet over it. So I understand why they do it. If they're doing this over a wood subfloor, they would just use staples. They don't need the adhesive, but over concrete, they need the adhesive. So it may be a two-step process, like utilizing something like the AFM 3-in-1 adhesive, which is a mastic that takes a little bit longer for it to cure out. I've used that over concrete, but you can't do it right away. You got to give it a few hours before you put the carpet down. So it may add to your installation cost, but it definitely will work.
So if you're doing wool over a concrete slab on grade, would you use a wool underlayment?
Yes.
And there's no vapor barrier there?
No vapor barrier.
Okay, so your slab has to be fairly dry, but it can also dry up through this. So
so this is where you have to make the determination on your end. What are we dealing with? So I always recommend, going to Amazon and buying a $50 kit. It's called a calcium chloride test. And a calcium chloride test is going to measure the vapor pressure coming up through the slab. So basically, is there moisture vapor pushing up through the slab or not? If there is, understand what's happening underneath your floor. And if there's too much vapor pressure and you put something like carpet, like wool carpet, wool pad over it, if there's too much moisture, eventually it could stay wet and lead to a mold problem. So here you might want to use like some type of a penetrating sodium silicate to block the vapors. You might want to use a product like Super Seal, which it's a Canadian manufacturer of a dimple board material, like a rolled out dimple, kind of like the Schluter Ditra, but smaller dimples.
Mhm.
And that is used under the carpet to completely block the vapor, and it gives you about an 1/8 inch of an air gap so moisture doesn't get locked in there. If there's not a lot of vapor coming out, then I wouldn't necessarily worry about it, but that's definitely something you have to look at in the job.
All right, give me 10 seconds because I just want to make sure that water didn't come in through
Sure.
the window. No, it's good. There was just a big storm and the window was open in the other room. But I have a huge overhang, but I was like, I don't know. Anyway, it's worth checking to make sure. I've got
Sure.
laminate flooring, which is very moisture sensitive, especially the older brands.
Yeah.
There's laminate now that's like fairly somewhat waterproof. But anyway. With recycled plastics, well, someone's asking about like recycled plastics and contamination. Well, they're usually just using the water bottles. So
Yeah.
I've never noticed like a fragrance coming from recycled PET products.
Yeah.
But there can be some contaminants from the glue. Like this is really, really minor stuff, but there can be some contaminants from the glue used to put the labels on water bottles, but it's not a fragrance.
Right.
And
Right.
when we're talking about things like flooring, it's not like if you're looking at maybe food containers, maybe you'd want to look at that more closely. But when I'm talking about like flooring, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and and I understand the premise of the question too, because somebody moves into an apartment and in the bathroom it's got a strong smell of whatever soap or perfume or whatever that somebody who lived in there before, because the plastics can retain those odors. But those plastics aren't used for the recycled flooring material. So you're correct. I mean, I can understand why somebody would think that. Looks like we got a freeze up.
Yeah, my power went out for a second. Are we still
geez.
here? Are we still live on Facebook?
We're still live.
Sorry, everyone. Like, just it literally cut out for 1 second. There was a big storm.
Summer storms.
So let's just assume that it's going to be okay. You were saying right when it cut out, you were saying with apartments, you understand the question about the recycled because of
because if you move into an apartment, you'll definitely smell the type of soap and shampoo and perfume and everything else the last person used. And a lot of those odors do get retained into the pores of the plastics, as well as other things, the drywall and wood shelving and so forth. So I completely understand why we all would think this. It's just that those are not the types of materials that end up in our recycled flooring materials and carpeting and things like that. So it does exist, but it will not be a problem when using these other materials.
Yeah. Okay. So if anyone has questions, I am monitoring the comments. When people are choosing flooring, like where do you see people get stuck on making the decision?
Wow, that's a good question, and it can certainly get deep too. I think that people get stuck on three things: aesthetic, price point, and health. And the problem is that while we would all tell each other, oh yeah, it always comes down to the health, and I always buy the healthiest possible. Folks, we're not fooling anybody. It's never that. It's always a combination of all three, and typically price point's the one that wins. And so I can say that because I've been selling flooring materials for 31 years, and I've worked through this process so many times with folks. I can give you a flooring material that is completely toxin free, completely odorless. It's really the best material you could ever think of living on from a health standpoint, but you're not going to like the look of it. You may not like the price of it. And then I'm going to get that face like, well, I wish it would just look a little bit more like this. And they show me a Pinterest page with 1,000 pictures of LVP. Okay, well, I can give you LVP, but now you're not going to have any of this, this, and this, and this that you're looking for. And then they'll say, yeah, but we have a budget of, $4 a square foot. So I guess this is what we get. And then that's it. I mean, so then it comes down to money is always the number one motivator. The problem we have is in the last 20 years with the invention of like HGTV and all these fix-up shows and the Home Depots and Lowe's of the world, we have completely lied about how long it takes and how much it costs to properly build or remodel a space.
Yeah.
You go into a big box store and you get a flooring material for 99 cents a square foot, and you go, that looks exactly like what I saw in that magazine article. I guarantee it's not. Guaranteed. And now you say, all right, now I want to be able to live in this home and have it be completely healthy or odorless. This is where I think we all take on this too much. We take on too much responsibility for these things, and where I've luckily had the ability to help so many people over the years is when building a house, helping with making those decisions and not getting mired in the detail of, is this the perfect color Sherwin-Williams off-white for the house? Honestly, folks, who cares? It's not going to change the health of the space. Now, I grant you, the color that you put on your walls can help you in a healthy manner because of the traditional color psychology and how it makes you feel. I understand that. But if you're choosing between China white, bone white, decorator white, and alabaster, that's so much stress. Pick one, move on. Let's move on to something that actually makes a difference for the health of the occupant. Understand that your brain will forget the color within 2 weeks of moving into the house. You won't even know it exists. And so I just wish people would spend time on these details, because I can't tell you how many calls I get after the fact saying, oh, we were just trying to get this done because we were so sick of making decisions. We put this product in and now we're all sick. How do we fix it? Well, rip it out and replace it.
Yeah.
That's your fix. And then I always, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, if you just would have taken 5 minutes before. And I have to say that because I don't want people to run into that same problem again and again and again. So there are healthy replacements for just about anything inside of the home, but you have to make that your number one priority. You have to make, obviously, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. So let's say, what is the healthiest flooring we can get for our dollar? And they make aesthetic the very last thing we worry about, because you can always change the material 10 years down the road when you can afford something that you like the look of better. Just get into the home and get into that healing environment so that you're away from the toxic environment you're living in. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, what I see, unfortunately, is when someone ends up with a flooring that's toxic for them, is that they actually didn't know, is they actually read the website, which said this is the eco version and this is the green version, and they had all these, and they were surprised that like the binder was actually formaldehyde, which is still used in some floorings, or like they literally didn't know because the websites are so vague. So getting like individual help is super important.
Without a doubt, people want to believe what they read because it eliminates that from the equation. Like, all right, well, I did my best. I read it. It said green, therefore I guess it's healthy, which we all know green does not mean healthy. Green can mean a lot of things: health, sustainability, environment. And so we have to dig a little deeper, especially for those who have sensitivities, who have family members in the home that suffer from any type of illness, or we're just trying to do our best. It makes sense to ask a few more questions and don't just believe what's written on paper. Understand that that carpeting I was talking about before was deemed a zero VOC eco-friendly carpet, and it still released tons of formaldehyde.
Yeah, that's
They,
a
you know,
interesting one.
that's the thing, is that we need to not just believe these,
Yeah.
billion-dollar multinational companies who are trying to sell you products. They're not trying to make your life healthier. They're trying to sell the products.
And if you've had MCS for a while, you probably know that. But if you're new to it, it can be a really big shock, and you can have some really expensive mistakes.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so this started years ago with what's called greenwashing, which is, companies or marketing companies who try to make products sound or just appear to be more eco-friendly or healthy than they really are, just to get people to buy them. And now it's getting even worse because of,
haven't gotten better.
People buy paint, for instance, go down to the hardware store and say, well, I found a zero VOC paint, I'll use that, we're covered. Well, no, you're not. Keep in mind that only talks about VOCs that are actually regulated by the EPA. Doesn't say anything about the 37 VOCs that are not regulated, or the thousands and thousands of other chemicals that aren't even VOCs that can still emit. And so we got to look for products that actually have a track record of being toxin free and friendly to people who have severe sensitivities.
Yeah, I have one more question, short question about flooring, but I just want to say, there's number of people have asked me about this sort of popular paint brand, but it's like, it's not very known. It's internet based only. We don't have a lot of experience with chemically sensitive people using it. So it's like, why do that when we have like a few really good brands that are like long tested by the chemically sensitive, more transparent. Anyway, but my last question about flooring is, someone asked, and it was on my list too, and I should have asked you when you talked about gluing down flooring, and sometimes, and especially the types of glues that are used for like engineered wood, gluing down engineered wood and those similar types of plank flooring, some of them list zero VOC, but like seem to have problem curing. Have you had that experience?
Yeah. So again, it all comes down to understanding that the VOC content of a product has nothing to do with human health. It has to do with whether it meets the governmental regulation for outdoor air pollution. There are a whole host of flooring adhesives now that are what are called silane based, which are lower odor, lower emitting, but they still will emit things. They just won't emit calculated VOCs. And so they will have a very distinct aroma that can last for months or years. They'll technically
meet the silane base or the urethane as well.
Well, the urethane base are worse, I would say. The silane base are better. People ask the question all the time, what is the safest wood floor adhesive out there? Well, I would choose a silane based, a Bona, a Taylor, one of those well-known brands that have a silane base, and just be done with it, because it's not going to be non-toxic. It's impossible. And then the question comes, well, how do you speed up the off-gassing? You don't. There is no way to speed up off-gassing. You can assist it from becoming built up in the air just through air movement, through fans and ventilation, but you're not going to speed up the process of it releasing from the surface. There's no way to do that.
And it depends on how breathable the flooring is, right? Like if it's totally trapped.
Correct. Yeah. And so like for this question where it's, subfloor glue in the crawl space, obviously off-gassing is that release of unreacted chemical monomers. It's only going to travel if it can travel. If it's covered up by something that's blocking it, it's just going to stay there. It's not going to come out. It could come out in 20 years if you ripped up the subfloors again and exposed it to the air. That's what happened a lot with older homes that had original plywood subfloors from the 70s. They opened up those subfloors. They took the beautiful hardwood flooring off, open up the subfloors, and now all of a sudden their plywood is off-gassing tremendous amounts of urea formaldehyde because it never had a chance to release before. All you can do is air movement and air purification.
And then, okay, that was, okay, one more because someone asked if there's a trade-off between occupant health and durability, longevity with paint. I don't think so. I think both Kiem and AFM and Ecos are great quality.
Yeah, I would agree. Years ago, the myths of these healthier products were they don't work as well, they don't cover as well. You have very limited color choices, and they're more difficult to get, and they're more expensive. So the 4 big things. And I think for the most part, these have all been debunked over the years. They are easier to get now. They come in thousands of colors. I mean, Ecos even just a few years ago started using the exact same color deck that AFM uses for some uniformity, which is cool.
Except for Kiem. How do you say that? Kiem?
Kiem.
Kiem has the limited colors, right? And you can't.
They have limited, yeah, but that's also because they are using nothing but natural mineral pigments, which is also what makes their colors so cool and so deep. But they, the bigger issue we've had with like zero VOC paints over the years is like the early versions. A lot of them weren't very good because paint manufacturers didn't know how to make paint without VOCs to meet their durability requirements. That has changed, but keep in mind that for the most part, most paint companies rely on some really obscure chemistry to meet the durability, scrub resistance, and meet the VOC regs, which is why I kind of like going to those tried and true brands like AFM, Ecos, and Kiem.
Yeah, you can also see like PFAs have been added to conventional brands to make them more like stain resistant and more. So there's lots of like they may be functioning well, but they're not always.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can still get good quality in the.
Yeah, and you have to pick your battles, right? I mean, I think all of us as consumers would love to be able to go into the store and buy a product that was inexpensive, beautiful, easy to apply, lasts forever, has all these attributes. When we're buying products, really starting from the health aspect first, again, pick your battles. If a product maybe it requires a tad bit more of maintenance, but understand that in the long run, it's going to be far, far safer to live with and meets a good price point, then it's probably worth it.
And just one more comment about the paint quality is like the big brands, like the mainstream brands, they almost all have zero VOC paints now, but some of them are really low quality. Like some of them are just made for like contractors who like repaint apartments every year. Yeah. So don't just go for the cheapest one, even if it's and Andy has already talked about why zero VOC might not even be the best either, but just yeah, like the prices of AFM and Ecos are in line with like the quality of, because every paint comes in different qualities. So yeah,
that's a good point. The paint industry is actually one of the few segments of the building industry that you really almost always get what you pay for.
Yeah.
There's some exceptions.
You can tell the quality by the price, basically.
Right. If you are buying what's called contractor grade paint, which is one coat coverage, any 6-year-old with a paintbrush can make the wall look decent, and it's $25 a gallon, it's going to last on your wall for about 6 to 12 months before it actually starts to dust and chalk off the wall. Don't even get me started on the health of it. From a durability standpoint, it's not a great product. Then you get products like AFM, Fine Paints of Europe, Farrow and Ball paints. I got to tell you, I love their products. Absolutely love them. I would recommend them more often to people if they weren't so expensive.
Yeah, me too. They're really
low. Twice the cost of Safecoat, but they're beautiful and they're not toxic.
Yeah, they're really low odors. But I mean, different sheens have different odors. But the base, like their popular one, is like super low odor. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, since we've gone a little bit over an hour, we can stop here. There was one question just about like. So I recommend Green Design Center because not just obviously because of the products, but because of the support that you get. But someone also asked like about Canada. Like, can you say which products ship to Canada while we're closing out?
So we can actually ship all of our products to Canada through the website. Some of the time due to the size of it, we may have to reach back out and say we need to, you know, work on the freight rate a little bit. But for the most part, the website calculates most of the pricing properly. Larger ticket items like air purification systems, flooring materials, things of that nature, we'd probably ask that you reach out via email and give us the particulars, and we'll get you a freight rate. You know, I do work with a company in Ottawa called Eco Building Resource. Kevin Royce, his company, is a supplier of Safecoat. We work with him with the product, and you know, I certainly, you know, while his forte is not chemical sensitivity, his forte is building construction, and he's been in that industry for a long time. He knows the industry very well. You know, he wouldn't have a conversation like this about sensitivities and off-gassing, but he'd be more than happy to talk about the building process and products that he would have to make it healthier.
Okay, so I'm going to put some links. If you're watching, I'm not going to be able to put them in the live, but I'll put them in the replay, like for the paints that we talked about and the flooring, like the cork flooring for sure. Is there anywhere else you want people to like follow along?
You know, from our website, thegreendesignCenter.com, you can actually find the podcast, Non-Toxic Environments. We take the summers off, but we'll be starting up again probably in the next 2 months with new episodes. Corinne, you've been on one of our episodes before. It was a lot of fun. We had a great response.
That's
and
great.
so we'll be booking, we're actually starting to book guests for the next season right now. And then also we started a YouTube channel, which is essentially just the live broadcast from the podcast put on there. And then we're starting to do some technical how-tos. We'll be working on that probably in late summer, early fall.
Yeah, you guys should. That'd be great. Okay, cool. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. It's absolutely my pleasure. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye, everybody.